Clock. I call the July 2021 Town of Clayton Planning Board meeting to order. For roll call, all of our current board members are present this evening. Item number 2 on our agenda is adjustments to the agenda. I am aware of one, and that is the addition of 2 sets of minutes that need approval. Are there any other adjustments to the agenda needed? If there are none, we will move on to item number 3, approval of the minutes. These are minutes from April 26, 2021 and June 28, 2021 Planning Board meetings. Are there any corrections to the minutes needed? Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Motion to approve by Board Member Coates. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Lipscomb. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries. Our next item on the agenda this evening is 5A. So this is 2021-54-RZ, Landmark Light Industrial Building Rezoning, and we'll now hear from staff.
Good evening, members of the Planning Board. Ben Painter, Town of Clayton Planning Department. Tonight, I'm going to be presenting to you case number 2021-54RZ, the Landmark Light Industrial Building Rezoning. This is a request to rezone the property from what is currently planned development commercial to I-1 or light industrial zoning. Property is about 24.81 acres in size. Currently, it's vacant. And it's off of Shotwell Road with the city dump road to the north. See on the aerial map that stubs out and goes into the Dollar General Distribution Center with the Fast Med Administrative Building, which I think is also currently vacant now. And then to the south, the Stallings Mill apartment complex. And then kind of over to that, the very far southeast corner is Cameron Crossing and that whole area. So on the current zoning map, you can see it's zone PDC, which is a planned development designation. The applicant is requesting to go to a light industrial standard zoning, which would allow for uses such as warehousing, distribution, that sort of thing. And here you can see from the street, the property is currently vacant. To the right is where City Dump Road goes in and stubs out at the Dollar General Distribution Center. And down the way on the left is where the Cameron Crossing is, and on down to 70. This is a proposed site layout. This is something that is a potential concept for the site, a warehouse distribution type use with circulation for trucking traffic and vehicles. This hasn't been submitted as a site yet, so it's not been TRC reviewed, but this is a kind of a concept of what a potential use could be on the property. Consistency and compatibility. The proposed use is consistent with what's existing along Shotwell Road. It's very similar to current warehousing and distribution uses that have been along Shotwell Road for a long time. The comprehensive plan does designate this parcel in the future land use map as community mixed use. So it's not consistent with the future land use map, but with this rezoning, there's the ability to update it and make it consistent with Employment Center, which is also in that area and comprises a large portion of the future land use map for that area as well. So certain objectives that this would be supporting in the comprehensive plan is encouraging redevelopment or adaptive reuse of underutilized commercial areas, and then encouraging a mix of non-residential land uses along with residential. And here's an example of if the future land use map reflected this rezoning, this is where the employment center would be continuing down to the south a little bit further and encompassing the area and those uses. Does recommend approval of this rezoning request because it's consistent with the current uses. Employment center is a future land use designation in that area. And we also have the applicant here to answer any questions you might have as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any questions for staff at this point? Okay. We can now hear from the applicant.
Good evening, Planning Board members. My name is Dave Williams. I'm the owner of Landmark Industrial, and my company develops speculative industrial buildings in the Carolinas. Thanks for entertaining our request here. Just a couple notes. We had a neighborhood meeting, and no one participated in the meeting, so I reached out directly to the adjacent property owners and shared the plan with Meridian and the owners of the Carolina Distribution Center. I never heard back from the owners of the apartment complex, but there were no objections or concerns. This property was part of the larger parcel that Ben described of the Carolina Distribution Center, and it's subject to declarations and covenants, and those covenants require that this property be used for light industrial or office use. So we believe this request is consistent with that. You know, this market is certainly underserved for light industrial use today. We have brokers involved, and they tell me that there are a lot of local businesses looking to expand, and there are just no options. So we feel this will meet a need in the local market. It's a significant investment, and it's going to result in, hopefully new jobs and tax base for the town of Clayton. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. Let's see. I'm sorry, one more thing I forgot to mention. If you wouldn't mind sanitizing the stand. Appreciate that. And next we will call for public comments on this matter. Thank you very much. Are there any public comments? Anyone would like to make a public comment about this item? Okay. Hearing none, I will turn this over to the board for their consideration. Any comments from the board? Go ahead, Mr. Lipscomb.
I think excuse me.
Is your microphone on?
I think the proposed use is wonderful. I think that we need.
I'm sorry to interrupt. 1 second. Is his microphone on?
Hear me?
Yeah, I don't think it sounds like he's on.
The green light's on.
Okay, now we got it.
Hello?
Yeah.
There we go.
I think this is a wonderful proposed use. I have no concerns and will support the rezoning, and I would make a motion to approve the rezoning.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
I think I heard a second by Board Member Moore. I wanted to make just one comment of my own before we take a vote here. I did look up some information just for my own peace of mind about the light industrial zoning district and the compatibility with this area, and I did think that there was enough language in that district to fit for that area with the apartments and that sort of thing in that part of Shotwell. So I just wanted to add my 2 cents there. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda this evening is 5B, 2021-71-RZ, Johnston Preparatory High School rezoning, and we'll now hear from staff. Thank you for waiting. Okay, we can probably proceed at this point. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair Merritt, members of the Planning Board, Councilmember Granis. Introduce myself for the record. My name is Jeff Keynes, Land Use Planner of the Town of Clayton, and I'm here to present the staff report for the Johnston Preparatory High School Rezone Project, file number 2021-71-RZ. Tonight, the request is to rezone a piece of property. It's currently zoned residential estate, RE, with the front portion of the property identified as highway business, B3, to an office institutional use. Before I move on, the request just to make sure that the rezone, there is an overlay district on it. The applicant is not proposing to rezone or remove the overlay district for the thoroughfare overlay along Business 70. That should remain in place if the recommendation moves forward and is ultimately approved. The current use is an existing farm use. It's approximately 38 acres in size, just over that. As I mentioned before, it's on Highway Business 70 across the street from Gordon Road. And you can see the tax ID number right there. As stated earlier, the current zoning on the property is RE, residential estate, with a portion of a B3 with a thoroughfare overlay zone. The applicant has requested an entire rezone of the property to office institutional, as shown below, highlighted in blue. And this just shows the front of the property from street view. As you can see, it's under current agricultural use. It has been farmed for quite a number of years. Most of you who have been in town maybe know this as the Tuttle Farm. This is the farm, and speaking with Mr. Tuttle, this is He is proposed to sell the property for the beginning of development. In looking at the comprehensive plan for the consistency and compatibility, in most cases, we look at the land use compatibility of a rezone. In this case, we took a deeper dive because the applicant who will speak and present, it is for a preparatory high school charter school. And so we wanted to take a closer look. It's not land use compatible. However, in looking deeper into the comprehensive plan, staff finds it is compatible with the educational component of it. Since charter schools are relatively new in the big picture of life, when I was growing up, we didn't have charter schools. Now they're more common. We do find that this type of rezone does support a facility, as mentioned in the strategy IC 1.1, and to support the facilities coordination and planning with Johnston County schools for the location and development of public education facilities to support both existing and future population growth. The town is growing. The town is always needing new schools, new school facilities, and staff finds that this location would meet that criteria. And hopefully the applicant will go in more detail on what the school can do and offer for the community in that part of Clayton. But we find it's in a good location across the street from Griffles, down the street from Novo. Hopefully there's some coordination between the school and the preparatory portion of it with the businesses located on the southern portion of Clayton. Staff finds it is a compatible use. One thing to note as well, with the OI zoning, it can be considered more of a buffer zone. If you look towards the west, you see the rural residential. The east is more rural residential on the east, more of an intense use along the west. This is a kind of a compatibility buffer zone between the two to help, for lack of a better term, protect and let the rural residential area remain rural residential until such time if they decide to develop or remain in its current state. So this is a nice transitional zone between a more intense use of B3 or I-1. Yes, there is I-1 to the north, but in the big picture, staff finds this is a nice transitional zone between the two on this way to Business 70. With that brief presentation, staff does recommend approval of the rezoning request, and I'd be more than happy to take any questions you may have at this time, or if you choose, the applicant is here to answer questions on his behalf. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for staff at this time?
Jeff, I have a question. Are there any guidelines from the state as far as acres required for a high school, or, like a K through 8, which would be on these? I mean, there's 30 some, I think it was, forgotten what it was, 38 acres here, but is there a guideline from the state that as far as, because the high school, I think, has a whole lot more playing fields and stuff like that. Is there any guidelines to how many acres a high school should have and also a K through 8 would have?
I don't know any high school guidelines. Hopefully the applicant can address that more. I do understand that high schools such as Clayton High School, it does have a couple ball fields associated with it, obviously would require more land to accommodate football, baseball fields, as well as a gymnasium. We have seen a site layout. I believe the applicant may hopefully have one. Do you have a site layout with you? I think it's in the PowerPoint. Yeah, we believe there's a site layout in the PowerPoint. It's in general broad terms. Obviously, you can change it during the site design and site approval portion of it. But we can see if there's any, I don't believe there's any ball fields associated with this.
Yeah.
So
I understand we're not involved with the site plan, but I was just wondering if the property, compared to what the recommendations are is okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Is the rezoning, is the voluntary annexation pursuant to the rezoning?
Yes, there is a voluntary annexation. That application has been submitted to the town. That has been submitted. It's been handed over to the town clerk. The town clerk is going to present that to the town council at their August 2nd meeting. If the council wants to move forward with it, we believe the final step would be heard on September 7th, at which time the recommendation from this hearing board will also be heard at that time as well. So yes, this zoning is pending a final annexation, which has already been in process.
I know I just got a battery of questions because the voluntary annexation is pursuant to town services. So today, I guess, if the school was 400 students, do we have the water and sewer, specifically the sewer capacity to handle that right now?
That would be taking a closer look during the annexation process and also the site design process as well. At this stage, we're just looking at a rezone. We just happen to know it is for high school, so we can't look at the details at this level, but it's always helpful to show the planning board here's the bigger picture of it. So it's always nice to show here's what the final outcome would be. But when we go through the site design process, after annexation and after a rezone decision has been made, the town engineer will take a very close look at it to make sure it meets all water requirements, sewer requirements, and stormwater requirements. So can I tell you, does it meet it right now? I don't know, because we don't have a site plan submitted to the town for a full review.
All right. And do you know if the state Charter School Commission or the DPI has approved the application for this charter school?
I don't know offhand. That'd be a good question to ask the applicant. You can answer that during your brief. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions for staff? Okay, then we will hear from the applicant after the stand is sanitized.
And thank you, Mr. Keynes, for your presentation. Good evening, Chair Merritt and members of the Planning Board. My name is Neil Ghosh. I'm an attorney with the Morningstar Law Group at 421 Fayetteville Street in Raleigh. Tonight, I'm representing the applicant for this project, National Heritage Academies. And with me tonight are Mr. Bob Johnston, who's a representative from NHA. We also have Amy Jacario. All right, yeah, from Wade Trim, who's a traffic engineer, and finally we have Mr. Dylan Smith, who's an engineer with Valentine Associates. This rezoning is associated with an annexation, which we knew we needed in order to gain access to municipal utilities like water and sewer. Because of the annexation into the town, we need also to apply for initial Town of Clayton zoning on the property. Your professional staff has done a great job guiding some of our decisions on this project, so kudos to them. The first place they led us was to the comprehensive plan to determine what zoning districts would fit the call of the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan shows this area as an employment center, which is an area that should provide locations for primary employment and economic development opportunities. Generally speaking, appropriate zoning for this designation would be more business-oriented, but your staff recognize that the majority of this site is set back from the highway and mostly borders residential areas. As a result, they opine that a less intense but still non-residential zoning district would be more appropriate for this parcel because it would act as a transitional use area between residentially zoned properties to the north and west and business-oriented properties along the highway to the east. We agree with this thoughtful analysis and therefore are requesting OI zoning for this parcel. Aside from the zoning, just being consistent with the town's long-range plans, I also think the proposed use should be one which is welcome in the town. You may not be familiar with NHA specifically, but they operate Johnston Charter Academy, which is a K-8 school here in Clayton. In the short term, their plans for this property are to build a new high school on the property capable of serving about 800 additional students. In addition to the high school, the site is large enough to also accommodate a second K-8 school for about 772 students sometime in the future. There are no concrete plans yet for that second school, but the site does allow for that opportunity, and so that is one reason why the site is attractive to NHA. I think everyone is aware of the challenges with the school system here in Johnston County. There are 14 elementary schools, 4 middle schools, and 4 high schools, which are capped for the 2020-21 school year in Johnston County. Obviously, the demand is here for more schools. A new public high school should help alleviate some of the demand in the short term, and potentially a new second school on the site, a K-8 school in the future, could help accommodate some of the additional demand in Johnston County. Overall, we think this project is a good one for Clayton. The zoning request makes sense in the context of the area, regardless of the applicant. But in this case, the applicant is NHA, and they are looking to build a school here or schools, and the site is ideal for additional school sites because it has access to a major thoroughfare and is located at an existing stoplight. And moreover, the demand for the educational opportunities in Clayton cannot be overstated. I know there were some questions about facilities, and I wanted to share. Yeah, I think that's probably the best plan. I wanted to share a plan just so you could see, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, but this is the high school here.
That's correct.
And that's the facility that is proposed to be built in the short term. You can see that there are 2 practice fields and a soccer field on this campus. And then in the future sometime, this could be a site for the K-8 school for the roughly 772 students. So I want to thank you for your time tonight, and we hope to have your support. Our team is available to answer any questions. And again, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the applicant? All right, I hear none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any public comments on this matter? You can please come to the podium and state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Tricia Privet. I live in Lenoir City, Tennessee. I am the trustee for the Dorsey M. Matthews Living Trust property, which is directly north of this parcel in question. So I have 2 areas of concern. One is potential future use of our parcel. We have about 30 acres with about 900 plus feet of highway frontage directly north of this property. Although we are using it for agricultural use right now, it is not inconceivable that, a few years in the future that will be sold and converted to industrial or commercial. So the concern that I have is whether the presence of a school in such close proximity will have any negative effects on that ability to develop that land in a commercial manner. And then the other issue that I have is you can't really see it from this preliminary site plan right here, but the access road into the property comes down through that narrow panhandle that connects with Highway 70. It's not clear from the preliminary site plan just how close that drive is going to come to the property line. So I would like to preserve some sort of a physical barrier between the driveway and our property to reduce the incidence of possible trespassing, whether it's accidental or intentional. That presents a liability risk for us. So those are the two concerns that we have, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for speaking. Are there any other comments, public comments that would like to be made this evening? Okay.
If it's appropriate, we'd like to take a minute to respond to the comments.
Sure.
All right, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, say that one right
Yeah,
there.
right
Yeah. So, Bob Johnston with National Heritage Academies. Thank you for having us, by the way. And there was another question from Mr. Moore, too. We'll answer that one as well. Ms. Privet was on the neighborhood meeting with us and brought up those same issues, and we discussed them a little bit. The couple things I'd like to point out, the majority where Neil is pointing here of that road that we have lined up right now, it's dictated by the signal. It's a signalized intersection. It's missing the fourth leg. And that signal would operate and carry the traffic from the signal into our school, which from our standpoint is a wonderful thing.
And I hate to interrupt you, I'm so sorry. If I can ask just a little closer to the microphone, and you can also lower your mask. Thank you.
Thanks.
Just want to make sure we all get to hear you.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Anyways, so the signalized intersection begins to dictate the driveway itself. We have to run the alignment on it to get it to line up so they can come all the way through or make their left or rights appropriately. So that's why the driveway is actually set down. That's 3 lanes, 24 feet wide. So, we're in the 60-foot range, right? 75 almost, right? Sorry about that. So currently, the green space that's running along the side of that property line, I figured it was about somewhere between 30 and 40 feet for the majority of that road. And then as it runs through the narrowest neck, that same driveway lays in there, and we'll be able to meet the existing ordinances for Clayton as they currently exist today, as far as a setback. So the issue of trespassing, in my mind, is maybe an illegitimate one, but I'm not so sure. That's a swamp that runs all the way down the side of that, and it's a typical North Carolina swamp, heavily wooded, that you couldn't pay enough money for somebody to walk in there. So that's going to remain intact through there. If we have to grade it and change it, we can still put in vegetation and control that. In the worst case scenario, I told Mrs. Privet, Miss Privet, I'm sorry, that we could install a fence along the driveway at the closest point right there. But as far as kids leaving the campus, so we don't bus, so the kids are brought to and from school by their parents, and there are no sidewalks, nor will there be any sidewalks running down that driveway down to Business 70. That's a bad idea. NCDOT doesn't want people walking up and down the side of the highway, nor do we want to encourage kids to leave the campus and go walk up and down the side of the highway. So I think there's a couple of very significant buffers in there. Number one, the natural buffer is a really nice one. On top of that, as far as neighboring properties, currently along Privet's property, there's somewhere between a 50 and 70 foot wide transmission main that it's like natural gas main that's underground. So that buffer also lays in there on the Privet side of the property. So I really think that from a devaluation of any potential future commercial, I think there's a lot of privacy and or separation left in between the two properties, and it is a driveway. So the other thing that also goes into play is the neighboring property behind us, which is a recycling center at the back, owned by Gary Taylor. He wasn't at the meeting, but he and I have spoke several times. We're working on dragging the sewer down through the back of his property, if you would, and tying into the existing Clayton sewer system that's at the back cul-de-sac of that property. And the nice thing about this property is the areas around the property and the surrounding, in this case, it'd be the east, as well as the the west, as well as the northwest, is that heavily wooded, it's wetlands, and it's very heavily protected. We're not going into it. It's quite honestly, you don't want to try to go into any wetlands in North Carolina. It's not a good idea. You don't get the permit to do it anyways. So unless you have to, and we don't have to. So all that vegetated woodland will be staying there on the west side. And as Neil brought up, and Jeff did as well too, the residential buffer that it creates to the, I think we have 5 or 6 properties to the west across the creek. Those houses are about 900 feet away from the play field, which is our soccer field. So when you look at that from an aerial view, most of those houses, at least several of them, also sit within 400 to 500 feet of Highway 70 on the south side with no tree cover. So it puts together a really nice buffer to kind of help preserve the residential as you move to the west from 70.
And Bob, could you address Mr. Moore's question?
Yeah, Mr. Moore, you questioned whether or not size was brought up in part of the process, as far as how many acres, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe Mr. Coates may have asked about the
Mr.
acreage.
A follow-up question to that. How many acres do you have up on Johnston Charter Academy up by Walmart? Do you know how many acres that is?
How many do we have right now?
At the school, current school you have here?
Yes.
How many acres is in that property?
7.2,
Thank
if I'm
you
not
very much.
mistaken.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is a K-8 with a slightly different footprint than that one on there, but the playground structures are there as well. The play fields and the hard surface court, as well as a jungle gym, if you would, a climber.
Thank you.
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Moore, your questions were more along the lines of, is the school approved by DPI?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so there are no acreage requirements that I'm aware of in the application process. And the other question you had was, have we applied yet? We actually, the application, the final application is going in on Wednesday this week. It'll be the expedited review process, and that'll be through the State Board of Education, North Carolina State Board of Ed. We would expect that to be, in the expedited process, I'm not sure, but somewhere in about, within 3 months, we'll probably have a first series of interviews, and somewhere right around the end of the year or first quarter, they'll actually, the approval would come through from the State Board, right in that time frame. It's a series of interviews along the way. And we have a staff back in Grand Rapids that does this all the time. This will be, I think we have between 12 and 14 charter public schools in North Carolina right now. And we've had some of them as old as 22 or 23 years, going way back when. So, does that answer your question, Mr. Moore?
Yeah.
Okay.
Follow-up. When you're rendering this before us, do you plan to pre-build all of the parking spaces that's listed? You said the elementary school is coming later, but you have an outline for the parking spaces. Are they going to be built initially?
So the high school is going to be parked separately from the K through 8 school, both of which are shown here. The plans for the high school would include 232 parking spaces. And the plans for the K through 8 school that's shown on this would include an additional 145 spaces. But if the high school is built, before the K through 8 school, those 145 spaces for the K through 8 school would not be built.
Now, on your stormwater runoff, you mentioned, I believe that you were basically, at least on 2 sides, but I think you may infer 3, that you're surrounded by wetlands. And I'm looking at your rendering, that only leaves a little corner to the right, to the top to the right, for containing your runoff. Correct. So on this plan, if you're surrounded and you're so close to the adjacent properties, and you mentioned that it was wetlands beside your driveway coming in and wetlands to the rear, your parking spaces, are you looking at any impervious surfaces?
Well, the parking going to be impervious?
Is it all pervious, or is it going to be some impervious?
It's
All
It's all going to be all impervious?
impervious.
Okay, so
Correct.
so there is potential, because you're already surrounded by a wetland with pervious surfaces, for flooding on adjacent properties. If that wetland that's used to farmland can't control the water flow from the pervious surfaces, impervious.
That's not how it works.
Okay.
We have to control the water on our property.
Right, you do.
Yeah, we have to. We have to control the water on our own property to take care of the impervious surface. So the area you pointed out is absolutely the area where it's referred to as a BMP, a storm water detention structure. So the northwest corner that's not treed right now, that's where the majority of it will sit. We also have the ability to actually make, I'm going to call it a long snake, if you would, and marry up along the edge of that property along the western bank, because everything flows all the way down to that tree line. That grade is almost exactly the same from the south end to the north end of the western tree line, if you would. So to the extent that we need to expand and create pre-detention basins along the back of that property, because remember, we have to contain it all before, the release rate has to be the same. So we can't dump more water faster and, well, we can't dump more and make it faster than what the existing surface is currently taking.
I just wanted to jump in here real quick for, we're getting into a lot of really specific things that don't really come into a play for a rezoning request. So I just, for my own head, to kind of keep everything straight. For this decision, we're looking mainly at compatible use for the surrounding area. And while these are very important questions, and I know, we have a lot more to talk about with this site if it moves forward, just to keep it all together in my brain, we're looking at compatible use just for the land designation. Just throwing that out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, were there any other questions or public comments? Okay, hearing none, I can turn it over to the board for their consideration. Any comments from the board?
I think this is a wonderful use for the site. I've actually got some of my nieces and my great nieces are actually in your school up by the Walmart. And I've heard nothing but great things. So I do agree that we're looking at the rezoning portion. I'm assuming that the site plan is going to have to come back before either us or the town council. So just, would you like to come up and speak to that, Jeff?
Thank you, Jeff Keynes, Chair Merritt, Mr. Liscombe. Yes, the site plan shown tonight is just for illustration purposes only. When we do rezones, some people want to know what's going to happen there. This is strictly for a rezone change of a color on a map. This plan, if approved and annexed moving forward, will come back through a full technical review committee process to be reviewed by all departments within the town to make sure it meets all town guidelines. So this is just the big picture, if you will. If approved and moving forward, the town engineering staff will take a look to make sure all the engineering requirements are met, planning will make sure planning requirements are met, et cetera, et cetera. So.
And after that process, it will go to the town council for final site plan approval?
I believe so, because it's a special use permit. It would be considered as a special use. So yes, but the site plan would be reviewed, special use, and site plan taken to the town council for final approval.
And one reason why I wanted to point that out for Ms. Privet, because she will have another opportunity to see a more detailed plan that's not hypothetical. So I understand your concerns as an adjoining neighbor, and I do feel like me as a planning board member, and I believe that the applicant understands that this is more of an industrial area, and it will continue to grow as an industrial area, but I think this is a good use for this site, and I think it can blend wonderfully. I think staff was right with their interpretation, and I support the rezoning of the property, but it will be coming back at some point in time to the council and another public hearing that these guys are going to have another neighborhood meeting with. So y'all will be talking again.
Excuse me, could we put the adjoining properties back up on your map, the map that you had when we were talking about compatibility? You had a map earlier.
Was it in the staff report map, Mr. Moore, or was it in the applicant's
It was in the
presentation?
staff reports map.
Yeah, I think, Jeff, he's referring to the map in the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you.
There it is.
Are there any other comments or questions from the board? Maybe while you're looking at that map, I was going to add my own comments to this, which was that I did like the fact that it provided more of a transitional use for what is directly happening along 70 to the residential homes on the western part of the property. And then I also, for the public comments that we received, I second Mr. Lipscomb's comments that things like the driveway and that sort of thing would be addressed at a later time. And then as far as affecting the value of adjoining parcels for future development, I completely agree with your concern and understand that. However, I do think that looking at the surrounding area, this use does fit with what's going on out there currently. Any other questions or comments from the board? If not, I will entertain a motion to either recommend or not recommend rezoning 2021-71-RZ to the town council.
Move we recommend approval.
We have a motion to recommend by Board Member Lipscomb. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Board Member Begley. Excellent. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no.
No.
Motion carries. 5 to 1.
4-2.
Oh, did you say no as well? My apologies. 2 noes, 4 yeses. The next item on the agenda this evening is informal discussion and public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak at this time? If not, I can entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'm going 3 for 3. I'm going to move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Board Member Lipscomb. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Powers. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Meeting adjourned.